We like to begin with land acknowledgement. If you all would join me in this, we would like to acknowledge that we are on the ancestral lands and waters of the Coast Salish and Duwamish people and their descendants, including but not limited to the federally recognized Muckleshoot Indian tribe and the federally recognized Squamish tribe. They are the original, present, and future stewards of these lands and waters. We raise our hands and honor them with gratitude. We also acknowledge the Treaty of Point Elliott and the Medicine Creek Treaty and understand the importance of these treaties as they preserve and protect Indigenous people and their sacred homelands. Thank you for joining me in that. So here's a quick look at our agenda for today. We'll go in a little bit to who is the Office of Labor Standards, what is our mission for folks who that might be new for. Then we'll talk about the App-Based Worker Outreach and Education Fund. What is it? What's included? We'll go through our race and social justice initiative commitments. We'll talk a bit about what is new and from previous years of funding. And then we'll look more closely at the application and evaluation process. And then we'll close with a Q&A period at the end. So like I said, feel free to put your questions in the chat, and then we'll just have this big time at the end to answer them all. So the Seattle Office of Labor Standards, we use this acronym OLS a lot. You might see that around in the presentation or in the application, so know that that stands for our office. And our mission is to advance labor standards through thoughtful community and business engagement, strategic enforcement, and innovative policy development with a commitment to race and social justice. And we partner with local communities where we aim to create effective outreach and education programs. This fund is one example of that. So really partnering with communities that are doing work within communities of workers around Seattle in order to really make sure that we're building trust and able to spread information in that way. Here is an overview of all of the laws that our office oversees. Many of these apply to most workers in Seattle, paid sick time, minimum wage, wage theft, fair chance employment, and then you'll notice some of them are for specific industries. And in today's focus for the fund, like I mentioned, will be for the app-based workers. And these are the three laws that apply to app-based workers. So the minimum pay ordinance, the deactivation rights ordinance, and the paid sick and safe time ordinance. And really specifically, we'll get into this a little bit later, but we're really focusing on the first two specifically for this fund, but all three of these laws apply to app-based workers in Seattle. Here's a little about our priorities. So we know that it can be hard for workers to want to come forward to file a claim with a city agency. We know there's a lot of barriers to people wanting to file a claim with local government. And so that's a big reason why we partner with organizations and do these types of funding for outreach and education in the community. We know that all workers could be impacted by labor standards violations. Many workers will have some kind of violation happen, but we also know from data and from community and from doing this work for a while that low income and historically disenfranchised communities experience higher rates of violations. This includes people of color, immigrants and refugees, Indigenous and tribal communities, women, veterans, people with disabilities, and LGBTQ plus communities. So these are kind of the focuses that we are curious to hear about from our applicants of how your organizations are connected specifically within these OLS priorities. All right, so let's get into talking about the fund. So this RFP is funded by the network company licensing fee, which is imposed by two other companion legislation to two app-based worker ordinances, the two that I mentioned, the minimum pay and the deactivation. And we'll talk a little bit even more about that a bit later on. The funding cycle will be for 24 months. So it will start July 1st of 2026 and go through June of 2028. There's $534,000 for the contract period, and we are looking to accept between 1 to 3 applicants. This amount of funding is available, subject to sufficient funding generated from the network company licensing fee and approval from the city council. So potentially could be changes, but this is the funding amount that we are looking to give out. Here's a little about our theory of change, which really just speaks to why are we doing what we're doing and what is the thought process behind why we think that this will work. So the purpose of this fund is to build capacity among community organizations to provide labor standards, services, and information to app-based workers, and to increase workers' knowledge and understanding about their rights under Seattle's app-based worker labor laws through methods that are community-centered. So we're really looking for, in your application, how are you connected in the community? Why do workers come to you? Why do folks trust you? How are you equipped to meet folks where they're at? Culturally relevant and accessible, language specific. So ideas around how to have events or do communication, social media, outreach that's in language to workers that you might be trying to reach, or certain industries. Are there specific ways that are relevant, that are accessible, that are in languages that you know make you well equipped to be able to reach those workers and those industries? And here is a little bit about what the App-Based Worker Outreach and Education Fund partners will do. That's what that acronym stands for, in case that wasn't clear. So the first part is worker intakes and resolutions. The partners will be talking to workers. You'll hear about what problems might be happening at work, what are issues that they're having with the minimum pay, with the deactivation, with paid sick time. And then how is your organization supporting those workers? Maybe it is directly supporting folks to resolve some of those issues. Maybe it's referring them to OLS or to another agency, depending on what the problem is. Workshops and trainings. So you can see in the photo here an example of maybe a Know Your Rights training. Are you going to meetings where there are workers? Do you have folks regularly coming to your organization for some kind of training? And how can labor rights be a part of that? Sharing information and messaging. So this could look like social media, other types of communications. Is there a newsletter? Are you creating some sort of educational material that could be useful for workers, using that in your outreach? And then lastly, community capacity building. So we're really interested in what is the lasting impact that's happening? How are we really building up workers to be able to understand their rights, speak up about their rights, and potentially share that with their coworkers, with other workers as well, and building capacity for you all to really engage in that work. Here's a little look at some of the impact we've had with specifically app-based workers this past year. So as you can see, over $1.5 million recovered, 6,200 workers paid from that amount. We've had 528 workers trained and 400 intakes. And this is just for our app-based workers. As you saw on the previous slide, we have a bunch of other laws. And so this is really just zeroing in on what has the impact looked like for app-based workers. And this slide gives you a sense of kind of our larger impact for settlements. And for folks who might not be familiar, the settlement process with our office happens through our enforcement team. So we have a team of investigators, and when a worker comes forward with a claim, they will talk to an investigator who will get all of the information and do a lot of calculations to see how much the worker might be owed. Maybe it's unpaid overtime. It could be a missed check, maybe no meal and rest breaks, whatever the issue might be. Or for an example, for app-based workers, maybe something's off with the minimum pay. And so doing the calculations, talking to the worker, talking to the employer, and then coming to a settlement agreement that will determine how much the worker would be owed in order to receive all of the money that they might be owed. So here's just a number on here shows you the total assessment in 2025 for 21,900 workers is just under $17.5 million. And then the quote on the left I really like because it's from a worker who received money in our Uber Eats settlement that happened recently. And you can read it on your own, but I especially like the middle part where they talk about workers learning their rights, reporting problems, and really finding someone who can do something about them. And I think that really speaks to the spirit of the community funds as a way to support workers in understanding what their rights are and then taking action. And that's what we're really hoping can come from this. And we know that there's real power in that education piece and folks having someone they trust be able to tell them what their rights are. All right, we'll talk through a bit about our race and social justice initiatives. You'll see, we'll go through each of these more in detail. Support, engage, leverage opportunities, and provide open and transparent communication. So we'll start with support. So how do we support community organizations? So one way is through partner feedback. So the acronym there, the COEF, that refers to our other community outreach and education fund. And then we have the App-Based Worker Outreach and Education Fund. We are always receiving feedback from our partners. We'll talk a little bit more about what those meetings look like and how frequently. We incorporate city budget office requirements. We have 2-year contracts, and this is really a way to give partners a long period of time to be able to do the work that you'd like to do, to see what the impact might be, maybe to make changes. We know we're always trying things and learning. And so having a 2-year contract period is really in an effort to allow for more time for that to grow and to adapt and so that you can really see what that impact is over time. And we offer materials and training. So all of the onboarding, your organization might be totally new to learning about some of these laws, or maybe some. We will provide training for you all, even if you had just one-on-one, if you needed one staff person to get some support about the app-based worker minimum wage. We can do some of that one-on-one conversation. We have a ton of materials available in many, many languages. So depending on what languages are needed within your staff or within the communities that you work with, we can be responsive to that. And we're also open to feedback if something's missing and we need to be creating some kind of new material. And we often do trainings when there's new information or any changes to laws that will come out. We provide training about that as well. Engaging communities, we work to really understand where communities are most impacted by labor standards violations. And we know this from the years of work of time that we've been doing these kinds of community funds and hearing from community members and knowing, okay, here are some of the industries that are most likely to have violations, or maybe highest violations and lowest likely to report what those violations might be. So really working to understand what that looks like in our city. We provide translated versions of materials, like I mentioned. We have some things in over 16 languages, I think, or even more. We provide interpretation for our meetings. So if anyone who is applying and then is coming to our meetings would like a specific interpreter, we will work with you to have that interpretation available. We review personal stories. We all know data can show a lot, but it doesn't always show the full impact or tell the whole story. So there's opportunities to tell us a more personal story about the impact of your work or about an issue that a worker is seeing. We'll talk a little bit later about what that reporting looks like as well, but there are opportunities to give a more narrative explanation of some of the things that you're reporting. And then primary language impact reports. So one of the things that we do collect is information around language, what languages are being used in outreach, in trainings, in intakes, and that just helps us understand better who are the communities that we're reaching, and maybe what are we missing? Are there any communities that we haven't been reaching? So that helps us learn how we are engaging. All right, leveraging opportunities. So I've been mentioning kind of the data that's getting collected. We have reports specifically around what's the outreach and training activities that are happening. So if you did training at one of your events, then you would be able to write that out, let us know what happened, where it was, and also for outreach, where did you do outreach? Did you go give flyers? Did you go to a tabling event? So we collect information about that. And there's also a lot of sharing of that information. So invitations to come for different organizations to go and table somewhere or have different opportunities to collaborate on that. We collect stories and share stories about what the App-Based Worker Fund partners offer workers in addition to labor standards training. So maybe your organization also does rental assistance or job assistance or computer classes. What else are you supporting people with that maybe intersects very well with supporting folks in understanding their labor rights? And then we also do embrace collaboration within the cohort. With this one, it's maybe a little different. Like I mentioned, there's 1 to 3 applicants that will be selected. So it might look a little bit different depending on how many folks are selected, how many organizations are selected, but we always support collaboration. If there's a chance to do a training together with another organization, some outreach days, or to kind of strategize and split up doing outreach in different neighborhoods, all of that collaboration is very welcome. And then we really prioritize open and transparent communication. So I mentioned earlier a little bit about some of the meetings and kind of the cadence of what that communication looks like, but here's a better breakdown. So we have monthly one-on-one meetings. The recipients will have monthly one-on-one meetings with OLS staff. This is a chance to talk through barriers, progress, best practices, what is not working, what has been working. That's just a chance to really connect with the contract manager and talk about any of those things that are on your mind, or if you need support in trying to accomplish something, that's a good space for that. We offer spaces for peer engagement at our monthly quarterly meetings. So we have all of the partners come together once a quarter, and sometimes we use that to talk to one another, to strategize together, maybe to share some ideas around a specific challenge that everyone is facing. Sometimes it's for sharing information, updates. There can be a lot of different things that happen in those meetings. And we are really responsive to what folks are asking for. Maybe we're planning for the next one and people have really been asking for one certain kind of training. We really do our best to make those a space that you all create and help to facilitate. And transparent communication from OLS about updates and ordinances, resources, opportunities to collaborate. I kind of mentioned that a little bit, but if there's a new law or, at the beginning of January, the minimum wage went up. So we're always sending out, here's the updated materials about the minimum wage. Here's any information you might need to know about any changes to the laws. All right, what is new this year? So the biggest new thing is this whole fund. We previously did not have a separate outreach and education fund for app-based workers. So in past years, we've just had one community outreach and education fund in which some organizations were doing some outreach to app-based workers. But starting in 2026, we are receiving funds from the network company fee, which is imposed by the Seattle ordinance. And this means that covered app-based companies will collect a fee per every online order. and remit the funds to the city. So based on calculations of, how many companies will be collecting that fee and submitting those funds, that's how we developed the plan for this fund. And fee money can only be used for activities relating to the two app-based worker ordinances that I mentioned, the minimum pay and the deactivation. So we set up a separate process to fund outreach and education for those. So that's the reason that the split happened. And just please note, this is really important, that if an organization applies with an outreach and education plan to TNC drivers, that's the Transportation Network Company drivers, the application will not be responsive to this RFP. So we're really talking about app-based workers, not specifically TNC drivers. All right, next slide. Great. So another new-ish thing, this is something we've certainly talked about in the past, but we're really working to bring it into our work this year, is incorporating strategic enforcement. So what does this mean? This is sometimes called co-enforcement, and it really just means government agencies working directly with community organizations to target industries with high violations and low complaints. So an example of this could be domestic work. We know that there are issues in domestic work. We've heard a lot of narrative stories about people not being paid or staying for overtime hours, for being asked to do things outside of their agreed upon contracts. Maybe there's issues with meal and rest breaks. So lots of issues coming up in this industry, but we also know that it's really hard to file a complaint when you're in this work, because domestic workers didn't have many rights in this country until very recently. So it's a really new industry to have rights. It's also an industry that's often been quite in the shadows. It's not work that's very public. Oftentimes people are working alone. We know there's a lot of immigrant workers in this industry. So there are many barriers to people coming forward, but we know that there are issues there. So that's an example of an industry that maybe we might not see a ton of people coming to OLS to file a complaint. And that's where it can be even more powerful to have some community connection, so that together we can use the trust and community engagement of the organization, and then also bring in the power for investigation and settlements that our office might have. So it's really an effort to kind of help those pieces of the work come together. Here's some examples of this. So it could look like some of our investigators going with community partners to do a work site visit, maybe going to a store or a restaurant or a construction site where we know that we've heard that there are issues, and trying to talk to workers. It could look like mobile intakes for specific workers in partner spaces. We know people might not feel comfortable coming downtown to a government office. So let's meet out at the community center if that's a space that feels more accessible or safer for the community person. And then partners naming and shaming bad actors during or after investigations. So this is one way of putting pressure on companies that might not be following the correct labor laws, and community partners have a little bit more freedom in being able to push publicly in that way. And then the last piece that's a bit new is that organizations outside of Seattle can apply for this fund. However, you must be able to show that your focus population works within the city and that you have staff located nearby who can interact with workers directly. So organizations located outside of Washington or who don't have employees nearby, these will not be considered compliant with the application requirements. But if you are outside of Seattle and you can show to us you have staff, you have connection working within the city, are in contact with workers working within Seattle, then that can be considered. Okay, so let's talk a little about the timeline. So the last day for questions is Thursday, February 5th. All this information is also on OpenGov. So, I mean, you can definitely write it down, but in case you forget, it's all going to be accessible there. So you can ask your questions by Thursday, February 5th at 11:59. We can ask questions today, and then we'll talk in a moment about the how to ask questions on OpenGov as well. Applications need to be submitted by 5:30 p.m. on Thursday, February 12th, and you will apply using OpenGov, the platform. And then there will be an optional presentation, and you can sign up for that 30-minute time slot between February 16th to March 6th, and you'll schedule that using a link that will be sent to you after you submit your application. Just note again, these are optional presentations. These will not be scored. The purpose of this is to provide an additional space for people who maybe writing in the application isn't your strongest skill, or you feel like you need a little bit more time verbally to be able to talk about your organization or the work that you do. This is meant to kind of be an additional accessible way to share that. Okay, what do you need to submit? So here is the list of all the things that you'll be asked to submit, and it should be quite clear as you're going through the application where all of these are and what the documents are. So there'll be a cover page with some basic information about your organization. You'll need to respond to all of the application questions. These are where you will go more further into what's the kind of work that you all do? What kind of work would you hope to do with this project? How are you connected into the community? All of that good stuff. You'll submit a proposed budget. And the idea is that the budget will match the type of work that you are proposing. So really showing here's how much we'd need for staff time, what we would want for materials, whatever that might look like for the work that you are proposing. There's a consultant questionnaire, an inclusion plan, and then we'll need proof of legal business name, so like a Seattle business license, Washington business license, and then contract exceptions, which is an optional step. We use kind of a boilerplate model contract for all of our contracts with partners. But if you had something that you wanted to change about it, we could certainly talk about it. There's no guarantee that that would happen, but we use this kind of boilerplate contract, and then the parts that we negotiate are more specifically the scope of work and how that aligns up with the budget. All right, so submitting questions. All the questions that you have, they can be asked today, and then otherwise they will need to be submitted through the OpenGov portal. There is a specific question and answer tab. And this, the exception to that is if you're having issues with OpenGov or a document that's not downloading, something technical, then you can email our email here, which is ols_RFP@seattle.gov for assistance with some kind of technical issue. But any questions about how do I respond to this question, or I don't understand what you mean by scope of work, or anything that's about the application itself needs to be asked through the OpenGov portal, and those will be public for everyone to see. And then we will respond also publicly to that answer within the portal. So be sure to check back for the answer if you post a question. And then both of the question and answers will be visible there for everybody. And that's really just to have fairness and make sure that everybody is getting the same information. All right, so how are proposals evaluated? So we have an evaluation committee for this fund. So there are 4 there are people that have been selected in city offices and in the OLS office to be a part of the evaluation committee. I will not be on the evaluation committee. I am just overseeing and supporting the process, and as the administrator, but we have a specific panel of people who will be evaluating. We have a rubric that is publicly available, and we're going to be looking at it shortly at some of the parts of the rubric, and then there will be a final determination. Here's a little closer look at the rubric. So this gives you a sense of what exactly are we scoring, is the panel scoring when they go through your application. So a big part is, who are you? Is there a clear description of your organization and your race and social justice framework? What's your capacity to do the work, to submit invoices and reports? And what's your connection to workers and labor sectors? Who will benefit? So here we're looking for, are you able to provide culturally relevant language, culturally relevant and language specific support, kind of like I was mentioning earlier, what groups of folks or industries are you connected to, and how will you be doing that work in a way that is accessible to people? A clear idea of how to increase workers' knowledge of rights. So what's the plan for the work? How is it going to look for you all? And what's your experience doing technical education with low-wage workers? So that could be around labor rights, but you could also share with us what some of the other work that you do that shows that you have capacity and skills in being able to support low-wage workers. And what do you want to do? This will be a big part of the application. The scope of work is the term that we use for outlining the work and showing a long-term approach to, over these 2-year contract periods, what is the work going to look like? What will it include? A realistic explanation outlining actions needed to complete the scope of work, and then a budget that really matches that. So if you are talking about doing 50 Know Your Rights presentations, what's the budget that might match with that, what you need to do in the year? And then how will it make a difference? How will you know? So identifying communities' needs, barriers to access, and scope of work that addresses those needs. And then how will you collect data or assess the impact of what you're doing? Okay, and after selection, what happens? What does it look like? What's expected of people who are our partners? So the first step will be to negotiate the contract, and this can take a few weeks as we talk about what is your scope of work, what's the amount of funding that's received, and what will the final contract look like. Then throughout the contract period, folks are expected to attend our OLS retreats and have monthly one-on-ones with the contract manager, and also quarterly meetings with the cohort, like I mentioned. Additionally, part of the work will include your intakes, the conversations with workers, other contracted activities that typically include the trainings, outreach, and communication. So if there's, social media, newsletters, things like that are happening. We also expect a timely submission of invoices and reports, and that will include data reporting, training logs. We have a monthly timeline for reporting. And then every quarter, we have a qualitative report that is kind of a longer question and answer that you can use to show a little bit more deeply kind of what's the story behind some of the numbers that you're reporting. And then yearly expenditure reports. And I'm going to share some of these so that you can just see an example. I can find out. Here we go. All right. Okay, here we go. Thanks for your patience. So here's an example of an invoice and monthly report. This is going to look a little bit different for everybody, but this is just to give you a general idea of what it might look like. So up here is where we would put what are some of your deliverables, how many, and then the rate attached to each deliverable. Some of that will make more sense as folks move forward and whoever's selected, and we'll get more deeply into that. You can see we collect a lot of information about different things. So there's one-on-ones. Let me zoom in a little here. You can keep track of your own self-study about the laws, public speaking, meetings, social media. So a lot of this are things I've mentioned, and we can adapt some of this based on each organization and the work that you hope to focus on and what you're going to be doing. There's room down here to put in your intake. So did you talk to the worker? Did you refer them to OLS? There's information here about what are the alleged violations. So with this being focused on the app-based worker laws, we're expecting that that will be the majority of what those violations are. But maybe there's other questions that the worker had brought up about other laws. And then we do report industry. Again, with this being app-based worker, we'll expect most of these will be under app-based worker. But we also know sometimes people work in multiple industries or have multiple jobs. So there could be room to show that as well. Okay, and then I'll just show you one example of the quarterly narrative. So here, I will zoom in. Here's an example of some of the questions that we have in the quarterly narrative. This is, like I mentioned, a chance for you to dive a little bit deeper about some of the stories of your impact. There's room to talk about challenges. Maybe something did not go right that quarter, or you had a big change happen, or something is happening with the community, with workers that you want to talk more about. Are you using OLS materials? For any folks that are applying in a collaborative, there's specific questions on how has it been to work with the collaborative? What have challenges been? Things like that. All right. And then this is just the sample of our expenditure report. This is what folks, what recipients would submit at the end of the year. And this just shows us, here's the money you received. What did you spend it on? What did it go towards, to kind of get an idea of how the money was spent. All right. So we're almost done. Meredith, if you could put up the last contact slide. Yes, so that just showed you some examples of what kind of things we'll be collecting. So you get a sense of what that might look like if you were to be a part of the fund. And now we can move into question and answer. And here's my contact information. So like we mentioned, if you have questions just about OpenGov, something technical, you're welcome to call me or email the OLS number. Again, if it's something about the specific application, you need to submit that through OpenGov so that everyone gets a chance to see the question and answer. But we can open it up for questions now, and I have coworkers online too who are here to help answer questions. So feel free to write them in the chat, or you can come off of mute. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. And sorry, my name isn't here. It's Jose Vasquez with Growing Contigo. I'm wondering, for this contract, are you looking specifically for the work to be done inside the city Seattle limits, or are you open to work happening also outside of the city limits?
Yeah, great question. So because the app-based worker laws only apply to workers who, while they're working in Seattle, definitely the focus will be Seattle workers. I think we if it's an organization that does work both inside the city and outside of the city, I think that's where you could show us in your application how, even though you're reaching maybe workers throughout Washington, here's the impact that it might have specifically with these workers in Seattle. And we also know with app-based workers, they're driving all around, right? Or doing jobs in many areas. So really being able to show us that, sure, sometimes it's outside of Seattle, but this is the work that might happen inside of Seattle, that would just help give us a picture of how you're able to do both. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jose.
Appreciate the presentation. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Robert.
When will you, and I probably missed that because I was multitasking, but when are you accepting the application and where can we get it to complete it?
Yes, so applications are open until February 12th, and it's all through the OpenGov portal. So folks will need to make a profile on there, and then you'll be able to access it. Maybe we can drop a link or something. I'm looking at maybe Meredith or Rivka of where folks can access it. Yes, we can get that information to you.
And you said Open Gov?
OpenGov, OPENGOV is the platform.
Okay.
Oh, and there we go. My coworker just dropped the link in there in the chat for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And yes, you'll have until February 5th to submit questions at 11:59 February 5th, and then they're due February 12th at 5:30 p.m.
Okay.
All right, I see this other question in the chat. What is the maximum amount that organizations can apply for? And is technical assistance, as in review of one's concept proposal, available from the city or OLS staff? So for the first one, you can apply for what as much as you want. I told you all the funding amount. So you're welcome to be like, pie in the sky, here's all the money that we would want for this project. There's of course no guarantee of what one might actually receive, but you certainly can ask for as much as you want in your application. And then there's also a space to let us know, okay, maybe that's the most that you would want, but what is the minimum amount that you could still do some of your project with? And so you can give us kind of a range idea there of, here's what we really want, here's what we could work with, kind of thing. And then for folks who are selected, there's kind of a process to talk about what's the reasonable scope of work to go with the money that people are actually receiving, what's with the award amount. And then the second question is technical assistance as in review of one's concept proposals available from the city. From my understanding, that is not available, but maybe Rivka, is that correct?
Yeah, OLS, here, let me turn it on. OLS is not offering that te technical assistance in terms of the review of a concept to keep the process fair. I guess that's something we could look into if there's another resource at the city that offers that kind of technical assistance. But it's at this point, I would say the answer is no. But if we find that there is something available, we'll post it to the OpenGov website in the Q&A section as a follow-up.
Great questions. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, how much in total is available from the fee that will be funding this program? Yes, so Let me pull up the total amount again. 500. We have $534,000, and that is still subject to sufficient funding generated from the fee and approval from the city council, but that's the number that we are working with.
Over 2 years, just
Over 2 years. Yeah, good call. Great. All right, I'll leave 1 more minute. If there's questions, feel free to come off mute or put them in the chat.
Good afternoon. My name is Nimbura from Siliana Consulting. I had a question or maybe clarification. I know you have said that you're going to be selecting between 1 and 3 organizations. The amount that is being suggested as budget is 534 plus, give or take. Was wondering whether what you have put together, if you are selected as a third organization and you have put in the whole entire amount, that's going to be challenging. So that's what I wanted to clarify. Is the pricing going to be one of the things that you're going to be looking at?
Yeah, great question. So yes, if we select more than one organization, this amount would be split up among whoever are the recipients. And OLS, we make that determination. The review panel of reviewers who are looking at the applications will make that determination based on, what the organization's talking about doing, how much money is available, and how many we decide. So it could be that that number is split up, maybe among 2 organizations or among 3. And if that were the case, then the folks receiving the award, you would then kind of work with the contract manager to say, okay, we asked for that total amount and we proposed this huge amount of work to go with that. Maybe if we're only receiving half or 2/3 of that amount, then our work is going to have to be scaled back a little bit. So that's what would happen kind of in that contract negotiation period in order to acknowledge that, of course, if you're not receiving all the money you asked for, you won't be able to do all of the work that you proposed at the beginning. So there would be some kind of negotiation in order to make those match more based on the number you're receiving. Here's what the project actually could look like. Is that helpful?
Very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Not seeing any more questions in the chat, but I'll stick around until 2 if people want to stay on and keep asking questions, or if there's none left, then you're welcome to leave, and we will be checking the RFP email very regularly, and we'll be checking the portal very regularly. If there are questions that come up on there, please feel free, as many as you want, until February 5th at 11:59. So we will be responding on there. So thank you all so much for joining. Yeah, I hope you all have a beautiful day. We got a little sunshine out there. Thanks. Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording. I think we're done with questions.